Just kind of. So, welcome everybody to our Mondays Energy Ninja podcast that Rachel and I do. And so, those of you that are hopping on, and this is perhaps the first video or audio podcast you're listening to, I'll just quickly summarize what Unicorn Talk and Empathy Unicorn Academy is all about. So Empathy Unicorn Academy, this is where all the training is. This is where I have a website and you can check that out. There's information on there. And in terms of these podcasts are actually in part of the Unicorn Talk. And Unicorn Talk is really just talking with people, having conversations with people who are unicorns. That's the best way and the easiest and simplest way I can explain it. And today, Rachel and I will be talking about coaching programs. The coaching, I've taken two different coaching programs. Rachel, you have taken one coaching program? Yeah. So one of the coaching program that we took together, not together, but the same program that we took is one avenue, and the other program that I took is another avenue. There's actually a lot of different avenues and ways of how you can go and get your coach training completed and done. And there are differences between them all.
Yeah, that's what I'm gathering. Like my only experience with coaches have been through iPEC, the program where you and I trained. And I wasn't, while going through the program, I wasn't that necessarily committed to the IFC accreditation or anything like that. I really just wanted the skills and the tools that my coach used with me so that I could show up in people's lives with those tools. And then it wasn't really until recently when trying to collaborate with other coaches that I started valuing iPEC and that IFC accreditation more and more. And I thought, well, maybe there's something to this. And and so that gave me the idea, since you've had two different coach training programs, to just I'm really curious what your experience is having trained through a different program and then having trained with iPEC.
My experience was very, very different from one to the other. The whole structure of the program is different. Honestly, the only ways that I can compare the programs is the certain things that were used in the very first program that I took, which was, I think it's called Life Skills Academy. And I mean, starting with the price, one was $300 and the other one was $15,000. So this phrase all of us are familiar with, you get what you pay for. And in this example, it was exactly that. So that's just one comparison. The tools that I received from the iPEC coach training program, I mean, the Life Skills Academy, I think that's what it was called, didn't have any tools to give. I was quickly, because I like to take notes, and I was quickly looking through the notes, and there are no tools aside from what you can already find on Google. What coaching is and what it isn't, and that anyone can be a coach. So to me, that kind of gave me anxiety in the beginning, because I'm like, well, if anybody can be a coach, how am I supposed to compete out there? And I haven't gone through iPEC. There is no competition. So it's like, Okay, here you're giving me an idea of what coaching is and how to approach coaching and how to take a person through coaching, which is pretty straightforward and standardized everywhere. I know there's like a lot of other differences, but I feel like I would like some cues on them of like what comes to mind for you? Because I know I've had this conversation with you a couple of times already with this with the differences between them. And another biggest difference is that detached involvement.
That's exactly what was coming to mind. Um, I mean, specifically in trying to work with other coaches, even with a therapist for a little while. I so I'll start with a therapist because now I'm thinking in chronological order. So something that turned me off really early on, like one of the first sessions with the therapist, is she was putting words in my mouth. I was venting about something and she was like, "Where's all this hate coming from?" And I stopped and I was like, "Hate? Who said anything about hate?" And that just it was a red flag because that's something that's so deeply ingrained into us as iPEC coaches. Do not put words in your client's mouth.
Yeah.
Ask questions, remain curious.
Don't
And
assume.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
We don't know what, we don't know what emotions are actually flowing through. We might intuit, but it's best to let them let us, in this case, let me put a name to the emotions I was expressing in that session. So yeah, so that was one red flag. And then more recently, in attempting to collaborate and work with other coaches, I've noticed that there was a real lack of curiosity. Like there was an immediate sense of the other coach telling me what to do without first being curious about the experience I've already had, what my personal dream, vision, agenda is, and then there was a lot of attachment to whether or not I was doing what I was being told to do, and my resistance, and sort of standing my ground and saying, I know myself really well, I know what works for me, didn't seem to go over well. So yeah, so it's that, it's the lack of curiosity, the attachment to my agenda, and the just telling me what to do instead of asking me what I want to do, and where I want to go from where I am. So those were, uh, yeah. So working with another coach, I was really um, disoriented because I was operating under the illusion that if someone calls themselves a coach, they have this set of tools ingrained, curiosity, detached involvement, objective, intuitive listening, active listening. Um, so yeah, stuff like that. So I'm curious if your first training program really touched on that. I guess it goes back to
Um,
detached involvement.
so here's the thing. I think most programs do touch up on that, but there's a huge difference between. So the program that I took, here's another, like, so you can see them in black and white. The Life Skills Academy or New Skills Academy, it was all written online. Go at my own pace. There's no videos. There's nothing. It's just written. I read it, and for me to understand it, that's how my process works, right? We all have little different processes. So I like to take notes and help myself understand what everything is. So it was all written. Whereas iPEC, you have written. It comes with the Coach Training Program Creators book. It comes with a lot of tools that not only did we learn, we also practiced on ourselves and with peer coaches. We've also gone through coaching an expert coach and with instant feedback right away. We've also worked with a success coach. We had, I mean, I can pull out my diploma down there, and each one it will say how many hours I have on each one. Right, with hands-on, with free coaching, and how many actual hours of coaching and training and class we've gone through. It's also in class, in person classes we had for the first two modules, because the third was online because of COVID. So those are the huge differences. Now, in terms of, do they teach the curiosity and active listening? Yes, they do, but it's not as in depth, and it's all written, which you can Google and find online. So technically, you don't even need to pay $300 to become a coach. You can just go to Google and Google all these things, and Google will tell you what you need. I'm quickly like looking over the notes, activities. Think about your motivation to become a life coach. This is the deeper dive, which we've done in iPEC as well. But here you have 1, 2, 3 questions to help you think about your motivation to become a life coach. Whereas with iPEC, we had a whole module pretty much on that, around that. We've written papers on it and deeper dive into the psychology of coaching. I mean, 63 pages of written assignments, and each page would have a couple of questions. I can't remember what they were called, what the actual assignment was called. I just remember it had a lot of like deep questions of, if this happens with your client, how do you respond, right? So not only practicing our skills with one-on-one and with ourselves and on our weekly calls, the webinars, access to everyone who has gone through iPEC, through Facebook. What else was there? I mean, all of these skills are put to practice, and then in the end, you do an exam, which was you going through a coaching session with no more than 30 minutes in length. You can do a little bit less, but you cannot do more, which then is transcribed and submitted for evaluation, which was the most stressful part.
It was really nerve-wracking.
Right? But having gone through like all of these coaching scenarios, all of these client and coach scenarios, and doing, I think we've done a couple of videos where we talked about the fishbowl, where you have one client just practice in the classroom, right? Setting one client and 4 coaches that take the person and just ask questions. Everybody has like, 5 minutes? And you coach a person for 5 minutes, and afterwards the next person picks up where they left off. And meanwhile, you have 2 expert coaches sitting there watching and listening, observing and taking notes. So that itself is like a huge difference between these programs. And in there, they're pointing out, are you actively listening? Right? Are you paying attention to what the client is saying? Are you getting involved and attached to their outcome? Are your questions leading questions, or are they open-ended questions? Are you listening for the key words, what the person is saying? So our ears have become trained just through the program, and then continue practicing it after the program. And I haven't stopped practicing since the program. So yes, this is a really long answer to your question about, do they teach these tools essential of how to actively listen, how to practice detached involvement, which I actually don't even remember that was mentioned at all. It's just objectively and subjectively listening, something along those lines. I mean, I can keep flipping through. There's limiting beliefs. Most of it is pretty straightforward and Googleable.
Yeah.
That's the way I would describe it. Yeah, it wasn't very much.
So what it sounds like is that a lot of this information is available, like a lot of what we learn, But what we do through iPEC is we embody it. So whereas we might read something like I love articles about holding space, because to me that's really one of the that's one of my favorite things about being a coach is practicing holding space for another being. And we could read them all day long and conceptualize it and understand like, oh yeah, this all makes sense. um, Whereas in iPEC we really learn to embody it and how to embody it in any given moment.
Mhm.
So I think that that does take that level of practice. Like it took me a long time to stop asking yes or no questions, and to ask the empowering questions we are taught to ask. Usually they think of
Yeah.
what, how, when, questions that help our clients to dig deeper. And because I'm a recovering people pleaser, it could be scary at times because I know that my clients wanted answers. Um, and which, if I was a consultant or a mentor, I'd be more than happy to just give answers. But my clients hire me as a coach. So it's my duty to ask those empowering questions. How does that make you feel? Instead of just offering my opinion. So yeah, and it takes a lot to get to that point. And that's something else I noticed when I've tried working with coaches who did not go through the iPEC training. I was asked, given a lot of yes or no questions, and that reduces the options into kind of just binary options, and that's a contraction. And there'd be times where I would just pick one, even if neither was relevant. I just wanted to give an answer, yes or no. And so I really value the coaches who have integrated that and embody that kind of cadence of questioning,
Yeah.
the empowering
And
questions that.
I
Yeah.
would add to that is that the thought that came to mind is um, the relationship. How long does a relationship between a coach and a client last with a coach training program versus an accredited coach training program? iPEC is an accredited coach training program, and there's many other accredited programs as well. If you're seeking or trying to find which program to take, go ICF. They have a list of all these coach training programs, and all of them do offer different programs. They're not all the same. With iPEC, we got access to a lot of tools and understanding energy levels, right? The
Mhm.
7 energy levels. That's a whole entire language, so to speak. And when you were describing to me this communication with other coaches where they're really just asking you yes or no, and in the end you're walking away not feeling empowered, how likely are you to be confident and comfortable enough to perhaps end that coach client relationship and be confident to go on your own and achieve the success that you want to achieve versus how we approach clients having gone through iPEC coach training, where we believe that the client does not need any fixing, has all the answers, and it's our job to give them the space to figure that out by asking deep, thought provoking questions that quite often do revolve around the blocks.
Mhm.
So, which one do you think would be a shorter relationship and a long lasting result?
Right. Yeah. That's that was my biggest takeaway from my first experience working with an iPad coach. And again, it's all I know. She was my first coach, my first hired professional, other than, working with a trainer at the gym. Like, so I had a physical trainer, and then I hired my coach and had a mental trainer. And that's exactly what she did. She working with her helped me to train my own mind so that I mean I kind of had the cadence of questioning down after about 3 to 6 months of working with her. I continued on just because I loved it so much and I didn't have any other relationships in my life like that. And but really, I mean, she actually was the one who was like, you know, that you don't have to pay me. I could just be your friend. And I was like, cool. But yeah, I mean, it's so that was in 2013 when I hired her. And for years afterwards, I would use that same empowering process of catching myself either attaching or in fear based thoughts or whatever was holding me back. And then I could hear her in my head of, you know, well, what's your intention in saying that? Or whatever question she used with me that worked so well for me to bust through my ego. And that process is forever. Like once you have been through that process of have, having mental fog and or yeah confusion or doubt, and then going through a series of questions that really help to break it up and realizing, oh, we have the answer through this all along, like the clarities within. There were just all sorts of blocks, primarily the ego, keeping us from that clarity. That is forever. And that's something that that first experience with my coach really gifted me, so that anytime a new block came up, I didn't necessarily need a coach. I would prefer one, but I don't necessarily need one. I could write it out, see my gremlin, you know, see my limiting beliefs, and I know the process to work through them. It is more efficient. You know, I would love to hire coaches my whole life, but as long as they're coaches who do not tell me what to do, because after that initial experience, I mean, I've got to say, I know myself so freaking well. And anybody who has gone through iPEC training, we know ourselves so well. So when people tell us what to do, it's really just, we know it's a reflection of them. And then it just becomes a matter of setting boundaries so that our own internal feedback loops aren't affected by someone who has attachment to our journeys.
Yeah, and that honestly, that isn't the other huge difference that was between these two programs that I went to, is that in iPEC we didn't just learn the process of what coaching is, what coaching isn't, how to coach, the tools of working through specific blocks, or the tools that will help us to identify a specific block, or the tools where there is no block and just help client through things. And most importantly, that knowing who we are, because having gone through iPEC coach training journey, I remember you mentioned that you went through the coach training program for yourself. Not your intention wasn't to become a coach. That was the bonus of that. But you went through the actual program for yourself because you knew how powerful it was to know yourself inside and out and have access to all of these tools, so you won't need anyone. So exactly what your point that you've made was that iPEC coach trainers, they come out knowing who they are, and when they hear somebody else telling them what they should be doing, they're instantly like, no, I believe in myself, and guess what? I also believe in you, that you have all the answers. Right, that you might think that you're broken, but you're not broken. You might think that you don't know the answers, you don't know what to do, but I know that you do.
Mm-hmm.
We've also got a little bit of training on strengthening intuition. That, like, and that right there is something that I've already been playing around with and strengthening my intuition. So when I got introduced to it at iPEC, I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. This is my favorite part because I got to strengthen my intuition that much more. And guess what? With all of my clients, I take them through same thing, similar thing, and help them to strengthen their intuition. Because here's the key factor of strengthening intuition: it's trust, trusting yourself. And with that, and this is where it's kind of like, I guess, a double-edged sword, where you learn to trust yourself, and in learning to trust yourself, you also learn to love yourself and accept yourself and understand yourself that much more, that anybody else comes and tells you something, you already know, and you don't need their answers. And the other part of the differences between one, detached involvement, because when we through iPEC have gone through the healing ourselves from inside out, I know after each module, each week's training, everything, I've always come out feeling like, oh my God, I've grown so much, I've learned so much, I've healed so much, I've let go so much. It's so powerful. And I'm taking clients so that they see the same thing. And the detached involvement is this, is that when we are in a session with our client, our self and our experiences and our things are not brought up. It's just what client knows, what client has access to. Yes, we can teach a concept of what we learned at iPEC, and what perhaps we might have learned somewhere else, but we always ask for permission. And don't assume, don't interpret, and don't bring ourselves into conversation, and we don't tell people what to do or how to think or how to be. Mm-hmm. And that is the other biggest part that I've noticed between iPEC coach trainers and most of other coach trainers or coaches, right? Because I do communicate with many other coaches, and there is quite a bit of a difference, right? We're not triggered. That's the other way I would describe it, is that when the conversation, when we've already worked through most of our things, we don't get triggered by our clients. And I think that one is actually huge, because when the coach gets triggered, then it triggers the client, and it can be a really messy situation. I've heard of those things happening quite often. So that's, I think, the other huge difference.
Yeah. I really appreciate that you brought up that we keep our own, our own experience to ourselves, because our clients are all, they're our whole world in that moment. So when in that session, however, we do learn how to use our experience as a reservoir of empathy and intuitive listening. So like I work a lot with, we both work a lot with empaths, and so many empaths have experienced some form of narcissistic abuse. And so I've been through that. I can speak to it. I can speak about my experience. However, that isn't helpful when moving a client forward. So, but I can use it. It is helpful in understanding, to the best of my ability, just how to hold space for my client. Understanding the madness of that kind of abuse, and just how much of a struggle it really is to heal from it. That understanding enables me to be a better listener, and to really value my client's own experience. I don't want to deprive them of the journey, because I know the value in it. I'm there, though, to help them access whatever they've got within through the journey, and I don't necessarily need to share my own experience for them to do that. I have an idea of which questions are best to ask, which might be most helpful, maybe what homework assignments might be really helpful, because of my experience, but I don't need to bring it up and say, yeah, this, me too, guess what happened to me. That just kind of like,
that's a friend conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And more of a consultant in a way. And I guess that's the other big difference is that even though in this program they explain the differences between a consultant and a mentor and a coach, um, not having, I guess, having gone through hands-on practice and being called out on the errors and having the errors pointed out and not them being called out as this is a mistake, this is an error. But the way that the professional coaches that were there, the trained coaches that were there and helping us and guiding us, the way that they did it is they empowered us through it. Like, for example, if somebody is coaching a client, right, or practicing their skill of the coaching during a classroom setting, the expert coach is walking around and listening. And when they hear that somebody's asking a leading question, they're being called out to, or stacking, when you're asking more than one question or two questions in one, they call that out. When you are going into a consulting mode, that gets pointed out. So that way, and the goal is not to shame you, not to make you feel bad, is to help you recognize and become more aware. So, and the way they did it is very, very lovingly, very polite, where the person just always feels empowered, and anybody who's watching, everybody feels empowered. Like, oh, thank you. That's a great example, right? Sometimes they would play these scenarios. Oh, I remember the scenarios that would play out sometimes. And then one of the you can tell one of the coaches had some drama training. So she was like really dramatic. I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. But that kind of stuff stays with you, and you remember what a consultant's job is, what a mentor is, and then what a coach is, and then what a client is, and what a conversation between the client and the coach sounds like, client and the mentor, client and the consultant, and which one of them all, because they're all beneficial. Every coach is a consultant, every coach is a mentor, right? We all have that, but not in the coaching session unless it's clearly identified. But which one of these three, the consultant, mentor, or a coach, that in the end allows the client to walk away after, I don't know, a length of period of time to work together, and be able to go and do it on their own.
Yeah.
It's the coach.
Yeah.
Because a mentor mentors you and tells you what to do and guides you and helps you with things. A consultant just really outlines everything, what step by step, everything that you need to do based on what they have learned, not really identifying who you are, because, and that's why sometimes it's difficult for people to apply what a consultant has told them and what a mentor has told them, because it's not personalized. Whereas a coach takes the time, and usually it's a longer relationship, takes the time to help you uncover and understand who you are. Anything that comes up reminds you that you have the answers within, but let me help you get those answers, and let's come with a resolution together, even though it's the client who's coming up with a resolution, right? And then they walk away knowing exactly what they need to do based on who they are, because they have understood who they are, they've learned who they are, and they're much more likely to succeed and follow through with the plan as opposed to the other ones.
Yeah, that I've started thinking about examples, like feeling my way through the differences just based on my own experience. Like when, and this is not to say that one is better than the other. There's a place for each. So when mentoring and consulting was helpful for me, was when I paid for a program to help propel me into spiritual business. And they had their own way. So they had a system that worked. It was called Spiritual Business Boot Camp. And they had their system. You have a Facebook group, you do live videos in the group, you have paid ads. Um, when I signed up, I didn't know that that was the system. I was really drawn in by their free webinar, and it got me, and I signed up. And so then moving along, I again, I just thought all coaches are like iPEC coaches, and we, get to the root of what the blocks are. So I kept expecting that kind of work with their one-on-one coaches, and I just wasn't there yet. So I signed up for this while I was also healing some PTSD, and a lot of the PTSD was telling me things like, nobody wants to hear you, you're hideous, no one wants to look at you, just all this, really deep rooted trauma, and that all going on in my head, while I had these mentors and consultants telling me, go on Facebook Live, put yourself out there. And I was like, no. And, so I could see how that would have, had I been, let's say, as healed as I am now, then I probably would have gone right along with the program, probably would have worked well for me. And then I eventually probably would have realized it's not really authentic for me. And so it didn't work out really for a reason. I stopped after about week 3 or 4 of a 12-week program.
Mhm.
It just wasn't, I knew all along, my alignment barometer all along was like, this feels a little off, but okay. So yeah, just thinking about that, had I been ready for that kind of mentorship, and had I gone into it knowing it was going to be more of a mentor and consulting kind of a relationship than coaching, I maybe would have held off a bit longer before paying that kind of money to be told what to do when I wasn't ready to do it. But there is a place as well for that kind of training.
Mhm.
Just as long as we're clear on I want to be told what to do, and I'm ready to just surrender to whoever's telling me what to do.
Mhm. So it sounds like you thought that the program was more of a personalized program that would have helped you to uncover and work through and create your own spiritual business, and not already pre-made program where you're just following these steps that the creator themselves, who was probably a coach, having gone through. And that's the other side of coaching as well. When we work with our clients long enough, then we identify what the patterns are, and we can create our own program, which is then the consultant part comes in, and the mentor part is in there in that program, packaged and sold. And we sell that program as a made program, step-by-step guide of what basically has worked for us and our clients, and here might work for you. But it sounds like that program was kind of a little bit maybe misleading, because it almost sounded like you were going in thinking that it was kind of like iPEC, where it helped you to uncover and work through it on your own without, here's the food, eat it.
Yeah, I think I thought it maybe would have helped me work through whatever was holding me back from doing live videos. And so the one-on-ones, like they did have their system down, like it was a multi-step process to get to selling automated courses. It was a program to teach us how to create automated courses, which I had in my head an automated course for empath warrior training for a while. So I thought, oh great, so that's what I thought I was getting myself into, just like how to create an automated course. So then when week 1, week 2, they're telling us to go live in Facebook, and I was like, I'm not ready. And I was working with their coaches. We could have, I think, like 15-minute weekly call with their coaches, and their coaches were basically like, well, just do it. Like that's it, we'll just do it. And when I brought up the blocks I was experiencing, they're like, well, just think of Facebook as it's a tool now. It's a business tool now. It's not a social tool anymore. So they were just telling me what to do, and it really wasn't addressing like, look, I have a deep-rooted fear of persecution. Like I've been my ex is already threatening me for speaking up. So this isn't working. And so I just kind of stopped continuing through the program. I stopped showing up for calls with coaches. And then eventually I saw in the Facebook group, I was moved to the alumni Facebook group. So because I graduated. But yeah, it didn't really address the root problem. And I'm grateful for the experience. I always, whenever I invest a large chunk of money in myself, like that program was almost as much as iPEC. And whenever I invest that big of a chunk of money in myself, whether it's fruitful or not, in terms of what I hope to get out of it, it's always fruitful in the end for the lessons. And having to sit with them like, wow, I really didn't get much out of that. That's okay. And it's a learning experience, and just like sitting with that. And it's like abundance training.
Yeah, I have, and that's one of the things I've also noticed in the iPad that, I mean, we have, I call it the Bible that we got from iPEC. Let me pull it out quickly. I have it here. The
Oh
Universal Wisdom. See? It helps you expel the demons. No, really. Like I absolutely love this book, and once in a while, I just one of my ideas for myself was to read it every single morning, and then it would just be laying in the bathroom on the side, and I would forget about it there. So I have it on my desk, and once in a while, I just open random pages, and I like to do it randomly because I rarely actually end up landing on the same ones unless I really need something. Um, like there's so many principles that help us that guide us, and I forgot now what you said that triggered me to get this book.
Maybe so. I opened right up to this page. A purpose can be found in everything that happens. So maybe that was my lesson for investing that much in that program. What is the purpose? And I found so much value in it, in just the relationship I made with my accountability buddy for that group. Like he and I are still buddies and cheer each other on. So if that what's money when a relationship that is going to continue probably to bring camaraderie throughout my life. Just like one moment in time. And I paid a lot for it, and I'm grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could read it.
Yes.
I read this. Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
No matter what happens, a purpose can be found. This idea is much different from thinking that everything happens just as it's supposed to, which suggests fate and denies free will. The coach empowers clients by helping them discover a purpose to the events in their lives. This process isn't done to analyze, but to grow. At the highest levels of consciousness, it becomes no longer necessary to figure everything out. At these levels, the ego is transcended, and there is no longer any need to know. Instead, a much deeper awareness and understanding of life's finer energies enable one to experience higher states of clarity and joy.
I love that. And these are actually great. This is a great tool that I don't know if you use it with your clients. I was going to say but I know I use it with my clients when something comes up and I can feel like there's a block. And I know that there's beautiful foundational principles in here. I always ask, do you mind if I read something from the iPEC Bible? At that point, they already know what that is, right? Because
Yeah.
I let them know what it is. Like, yes, please, I'd love to hear, because there's so much wisdom. And one of the ones that I read quite often, and I've read it to my kids as well, is this one. You cannot make a mistake. There are no mistakes, only different varieties of ways to experience life and remember more of who we are. We make choices based on our past, our belief systems, our values, and perhaps even the collective consciousness that's integrated in our DNA. We always choose what we believe is the best possible choice in any given situation. Instead of directing energy towards the past by beating ourselves up over mistakes, relax in knowing that no one ever makes a mistake. We tread, if we treated our friends like we treat ourselves, we'd all go to jail.
I love that one.
I know, and I read this one very often because most of us have been brought up believing that we make mistakes. As children, something drops and falls right away. You did that. You broke it. You need to fix it. You need to replace it, and all of these things. So we feel like we made a mistake. Apologize for what you did wrong, but it's not wrong. It was part of the journey, both of our journeys, clearly. So, yes, apology sometimes is necessary, but it's not required, because apology to me means that I need to admit to the wrongdoing, to the mistake that I have made. That's what my whole entire life of I'm sorry has let me to understand the meaning of I'm sorry. That in order for me to apologize, that means what I did is wrong.
Yeah.
I made a mistake. Whereas not necessarily, because I learned from it, and the person that is involved, if there's another person involved, they learn from it as well. So it really is an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Something that I love about um, these are all of our foundation principles. For anyone who doesn't know, iPEC coaches are trained in a set of foundation principles. They're kind of we embody them by the time we finish up module 3. And something I love about them is they're ancient. They all go back to ancient wisdom. And so as you're speaking about making a mistake, something breaking, like accidentally breaking something by accident, I was thinking of children and the way that children are raised in shamanic cultures. They don't make mistakes. They grow, they learn, but they're not scolded or yelled at or shamed for making mistakes, because in shamanic cultures, some indigenous cultures, they um, value the spirit of a child so much and regard any kind of scolding or shaming as trauma and separation of spirit. And because there's such a priority placed on spirit and an awareness of what that kind of shame does to the spirit, in shamanic cultures, they teach that causes illness. Any separation of spirit causes illness. So that's just something I love about that, is it brings us back to these really ancient roots. And I think that's probably why my journey with iPEC has led to where I am now in this like really deep shamanic studying and indigenous studying, because and other Buddhism and Hindu studies kind of all share these core foundational roots that value the spirit. It's all about
Yeah.
the spirit.
And that's a beautiful way of expanding on what this book is about, that these are all ancient teachings and ancient ways of living that has worked for many, many generations. And then at one point they got changed because people started living different ways. And I, when you were talking about like how the game and the shame and scolding separates the soul, right? It hurts the soul, and that's why a lot of people, as they are have now come to adulthood, they find themselves healing the inner child.
Mhm.
And in that healing their inner child, they what they're doing is they're finding these fragments of their soul that has been lost over the years, because when the soul is hurt, it protects itself by taking a little piece. And that's why we feel like when we're adults, we get to a place where we feel like we're missing parts of ourselves. And it's because we actually are missing parts of ourselves, because the soul, to preserve itself, hidden itself in our experiences that are not in the physical body. They are just kind of like floating out there, waiting for us to wake up and start doing the work, and start inviting one of these fragments back at a time. Um, and if you are considering doing this work, as after I mentioned, some people, I get some response sometimes that I've never thought of that. I would love to do that and try it. And I want to. There's a reason why I say one fragment at a time, because if you go and you try to heal more at once, 2 or 3 at once, it can be very overwhelming, and it can slow down the process. And I speak from experience because I did that myself, because I'm not like everybody else. I can handle it. So let me go in and, grab a few and heal. I did 2 of these healing fragments and traumatic experiences at the same time. And the result was that I wasn't able to go back into this work for about 6 months.
Mm.
Which was sad because I wanted to, but at that point there was also fears attached to it, um, because it's kind of like the best way how I would explain it is when people sign up for the gym and the first day they go and they exercise so much and they spend hours and like, yeah, I got this, it feels great. But then what happens is that the amount of times that they go to the gym starts to go down, because now the body and the mind um, have subconsciously come to an understanding and belief that in order for me to get the results, I must be doing it this extreme way, like I did in the beginning. So that's kind of like what happens with any kind of healing work we do. It's one thing at a time. With our clients, we don't bring out 2 or 3 tools in the session and say, oh, let's do this and let's do this and let's do that. It's like, no, we bring one out, and then the client continues the work after the session is done. So it's one tool a week. Sometimes it's one tool for a month, because it might already be more than enough until our client has a better understanding of it themselves.
Mm. You just reminded me of something else that I love that we learn in iPEC training that I was missing when trying to work with other coaches. And that's, or I guess they, this shines a light on the difference, and why that maybe they were mentors and consultants and not necessarily coaches. With iPEC, we can zero in on any micro progression. So like we notice the most subtle energetic shifts, and we'll stop. Like our client might be telling us, about their day and or about their week, and we'll hear something that's worthy of celebration, and we'll stop our client and we're like, did I just hear that right? Did you just say, that you're reading now 5 pages a day or whatever it is? And they'll be like, oh yeah, I guess I am. And we're like, well, huge. Let's celebrate. And well, yeah, so we're really trained in picking those out and holding them up to our clients and being like, look at what you're doing. You're doing it. And it's probably my favorite coaching tool is celebrating. Yeah, it's just the best. Like everyone's so amazing. And that was something that I was missing when working with other, I guess, mentors. I didn't really feel like my progress was being noticed, and I kind of had to state it myself. Like, look at like here's where I was, here's where I am. Like, can we celebrate? Do I always have to be focused on this end result that you made up for me?
Yeah. And that actually, I remember that as well when I was working with you as my first hired coach, that it was difficult for me because it was difficult for me to accept the celebration because for how many years? I think I was 32 when I hired you. 2 years ago, yeah, about there. So for 32 years, I feeling like nobody really celebrated any of my achievements. To now a tiny achievement being celebrated. That I remember there was one time I was just talking and talking and talking. I go, wait a minute, did you not hear what you just said? Yeah, I did because I said it. No, you didn't hear what you said. I can't remember what it was, but you celebrated my growth from I think I might have been comparing how I was before and how I am now, and just like simple conversation. And you're like, just pause and take that in. And that to me was uncomfortable the first couple of times because it's not something I was used to. It's not something that I did, and it's not something that I ever thought of. And my clients feel that same way the first couple of times because it's like, you're weird. Why do you talk like that? That's kind of what it is, right? Because normal people don't talk like that.
Yeah.
Like nobody notices the little accomplishments or points them out to me and then lets me know that I hear you, I understand you. That's incredible. Pause and celebrate yourself. Like clap for yourself, pat yourself on the back, whatever works, hug yourself. And then continue the conversation.
Yeah.
So that one is definitely like even for myself, and that's why I was like, I am going to this training myself.
I mean, it's such potent medicine for empaths because empaths pretty much run on our own resilience. And we just, we'll take the beatings and then just get up and do it again, sharing, loving, giving. And we don't notice just how much it takes to do that and how worthy we are of receiving. And that receiving helps us to regenerate.
Yeah.
And so it's just so classic. Like you reminded me of our workshop because that's basically what our workshop is shining a light on. The I Am Enough workshop is shining a light on. Look at how much you're always doing for everyone else. Like,
Yeah.
you know?
No, that's a great point. And I'm glad you brought up the workshop because it was a lot of the tools that we learned at iPEC, actually, a few of the tools that we learned at iPEC, we shared in the workshop. But there's always a lot more, right?
Yeah.
And
Actually, when we were planning for it, I thought it was so funny because when we first started planning for our workshop, we were just discussing like one or two tools, like the Wheel of Life and Aim Smart. And then as we were meeting week after week, we just like the tools started expanding and we just wanted to fit so many more in. And so I'm glad to hear you say there's always more because we can just keep creating workshops, keep sharing the tools.
yeah, and even each tool that we covered, there's a deeper dive and a deeper expansion that we can go in and do. Yeah. And then when you were talking about how children are raised in shamanic environments, how they're basically like, so when you were talking about that, the thoughts that it triggered in me was how people also used to live following nature and going with the cycle of nature. And then when the industrialized way of living took over most of the world, and I say most because there's still people that are living in tribes, um, that changed and people started to feel a lot of feelings and emotions that were not working for them. Fears being one of them. I mean, I understand that fear is one of the most primal things that we're all living with, but the way that fear has become part of pretty much all of our lives is there's nothing primal about it. There really is nothing primal about it. And I actually started reading this book, Change Your Schedule, Change Your Life. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but this book is basically all about the circadian rhythm and how our body and our mind, our whole entire self has its own cycle that it goes through, 24-hour cycle that it goes through every single day. And when we wake up at the wrong times, when we eat at the wrong times, when we exercise at the wrong times, which means that there is a right time for all of these things, when we do certain projects at the wrong time, it throws off the balance and we may find ourselves feeling disbalanced. And people that lived in tribes, they really just they lived intuitively. And intuitively, my understanding of it is living by a circadian rhythm. So, I mean, I'm only on page 19 and I'm like highlighting it and going through everything. But it's already absolutely incredible. And I started reading it to my daughter.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, "Oh, Mommy, I like it. Thank you for reading it to me." Honestly, like we all want to be healthy and feel clear.
Yeah.
That's the word that comes to mind, like feeling clear and that cloud being gone, that lack of focus being gone, that motivation, inspiration being part of our life, and feeling connected.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing it back to clarity, because that is the biggest result really from working with a coach, for me at least, is knowing how to access my own clarity and knowing what clarity sounds like versus what the brain chatter and fog sounds like. And so in my experience with, for example, the boot camp, the spiritual business boot camp, it actually clouded my mind because I was supposed to be here and I was here. And so I filled my mind with, you're doing it wrong, you should be there. Just a real lack of clarity. And as soon as I let it go, as soon as I just said, you know what, it's all right, I'm just gonna let boot camp go. I'm not gonna hold myself accountable for doing it anymore. I know I still have a lot of healing to do. It dissolved all that fog, and I could just instead focus on my healing and making myself feel all right for signing up for that course and paying for it. But that's what happens when someone else's agenda is projected onto us, and it's out. It just doesn't feel aligned, and our intuition knows. Our spirit, our souls know. It's just, doesn't something feels off, and that can create so much cloudiness and fog, and prevent us from achieving that clarity.
Yeah, it's also a lot of doubt and fear that creates that fog.
Yep.
And with the fear, the most dominant fear is the fear of unknown for most people. Having worked with clients, having observed every student in the classroom, including myself, that fear of unknown, that fear of unknown, whether it's failure or success, that's kind of like the extension of it, right? It's the fear, and then fear of unknown, and then Is it failure or success?
Yep. Yep.
Right? Um, yeah, honestly, I don't know. My mind is like tired now. I've been decluttering and organizing these drawers, setting them up yesterday, and I still have a bunch of stuff in here. And this is where um, I've talked about this a couple of times. When we are sitting in a cluttered space, our mind is that same way. So right now I'm sitting in a cluttered space and my mind feels very cluttered. Um, I love organizing and I love decluttering. And the way that I love organizing is that every single thing needs to have a place for it. And the same thing in the mind, when I have certain things in my mind, each and every thing that I'm thinking about needs to have its specific place. And I do my best not to overfill the space in my mental space, because then I'll be less likely to complete all these tasks. So once one of them is gone, then it's away. But this is a perfect example where my mind has already switched off and has been distracted by all of this stuff in here, because I gotta do this, I gotta do that, I gotta do that. And then throughout most of this conversation that we had, I have been reminding myself, I'm here now, right? Focus on what's in front of me, because this does not matter. And it then becomes kind of like a blur. I don't see it. But then as we're getting close to the end, oh look, 12. As we're getting close to the end, I am reminded of all of this stuff, and I'm already thinking of the boxes I'm gonna put in this drawer, what I'm gonna put there and organize it, what's gonna go in this drawer. So it's already planning and taking off, right?
Yeah.
Um, but
And that sounds like excitement.
it is excitement for me. I'm actually excited to organize the stuff and see what else I can possibly throw out and get rid of. Whereas before, my mind was very, very scarcity mindset, where I was keeping everything and anything, all the jars, all the bottles, even the lids from like beer bottles. Because one day I might make one of these fancy backyard tables that I saw, where you put these caps on, you pour concrete, you clean them up, and you put the shiny lacquer. I'm like, oh, I would love that. And then I've been collecting these things for how many years? I'd say maybe like 5 years. And then having to throw it out. When you were talking about just with the spiritual business academy, where you just let it go, you don't need that, right? You detach yourself from it. That is decluttering mentally, right? Mental decluttering, I guess, is what it would be called. When we let go of things that we no longer need, because we don't need them anymore.
Yep. When we recognize that's what it is, that it's clutter, and clear up some space. It's like, oh, the spaciousness when we clear whatever's causing that fog or chatter, unnecessary chatter. It's just it's worth it. It's just so worth the spaciousness to think clearly.
Yeah, and that's where creativity comes through as well, because we can't feel creative in cluttered spaces. Right now, mind you, some creators would say, well, I can, because I have my paints everywhere, I have my brushes everywhere, I have my canvases everywhere, and I'm able to feel clear and get the painting done. Yes, but that is considered an organized space. That's not a decluttered space, because you have the exact tools and things that you need for what you're about to do. Whereas the clutter that I'm talking about is a bunch of different things that might not even belong, for example, in an office.
Yeah.
Right? Like I have these two beautiful cones, and I've been holding on to them. I say two because they're like this, right? Like that. And I had an idea of hanging them on the door, but I'm like, no, I don't think it's gonna suit my office. But I haven't been wanting to let go of them, because they're really pretty,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But I gotta decide what I want to do with things like that. Do I hold on to it or do I let go? And either way, once a decision is made, that's where clarity comes through. Because if I'm letting go of it, that means it's already mentally gone from here. And if I decide to keep it, then I already will know exactly where it's going to go. Because if I don't have a place of where they're going to go, then that means it's time to let go of them and let somebody else have them.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of a different take and different ending to conversation between different coaching programs. Well, the two specific coach training programs that I have gone through, and I wanted to make sure that even though this is the end now, that because I don't know if I made it clear in the beginning and throughout that we weren't just talking about iPEC being the best program, that this is the only program, that there's many other programs. And what program worked for us does not mean it's going to work for you.
Right. Yeah.
Mind you, everyone that I know has gone through iPEC coach training and has worked for every individual. I have not heard otherwise yet. And now that I mention it, I might hear otherwise, right? And I'm still looking to hear otherwise.
I would love to hear, like, yeah, I would love to hear otherwise. If someone else did not have, such a great experience, I would love to hear it and hear why. But yeah, we're just speaking of our own experience. And yeah, it just felt like, just important for me to speak about because when I hire a coach or agree to work with a coach, I'm thinking what's going to be, about me, my agenda,
Yeah.
like the way we're trained, and not necessarily a like follow this process, do as you're told kind of process. So I just, it felt like really a great time to talk about it and get a little bit more in depth, because coaching is becoming the new normal. So there are a lot of people calling themselves coaches. And because of our training, I felt almost a sense of responsibility to speak about what we learn that coaching is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it also is, in a way, sharing our frustrations within the industry itself, because it's not, I'm not sure like how to call it. It's not like regulated heavily like a therapist, for example, is. That it's, I mean, the one day it will be, and then that's when a lot of um, cleaning will happen in the house, which means that a lot of coaches who have been claiming that they've been coaches without having specific accreditations and having gone through the ICF certifications and getting accredited through an ICF program will be forced to either quit being a coach or go through the training. And this happens with many, many, many different careers, different jobs, where it starts off one way and then until eventually that there's enough evidence, enough proof that what is, for example, like since we're talking about coaches, what is the best way, trying to formulate the words, what do we want a coach industry to be known as, right? What kind of coaches do we want to allow to be part of this industry, and which ones are not going to be allowed anymore? And which means that the ones that are not allowed to be anymore, they will have options of what you can do, right? And it's really just expand on the knowledge that you already have. Nobody's telling you what you have is wrong. They're just letting you know that there is certain rules that all need to abide by. And that's the other thing I guess I forgot to mention is that we have certain rules and regulations that we must abide by. Otherwise, we can lose our coaching license, so to speak, right? Whereas other coaches, because they're not ICF certified, they have no rules, no guidelines to follow. Free for all, almost in a way.
Yeah. It's the Wild West out there.
It's not to say that what they offer is not beneficial. It is, because they're coming from a lot of experience, they're coming from a lot of knowledge that they have gone through, and they're helping you in the way that they've learned how.
Yeah.
But there's different approaches, like we shared, with a coach and an iPEC graduate coach, where there's a lot of different ways of how we show up in any given session with a client, as opposed to another coach show how they're showing up in any given session as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and every Monday and speaking openly about your experience with these different coaching programs. And this topic has been hot in my heart. It's just been a personal observation I've been making, and so I'm so grateful.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this topic up, because this is something that I have been battling through when I started iPEC, because I've been exposed to other coaches in the coach program, and having gone through dealing with my ego coming up saying, oh my God, all these other coaches are not coaches, they're just saying they are. And I would get angry. And then that allowed me to recognize that I was not coming from a place of love, and I don't like that. And bashing my peers, even though they've gone through a different program, does not mean they're less valid or lesser than me and my training, right? It's just different. So thank you for bringing this topic up, because it allowed me to express myself a little bit more. I know there's a lot more that I can I can express, but maybe for another time, another video with another decluttered mindset.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a great way to transmute that frustration. Like, now we're creating content coming from that place, because I can resonate. I heard myself judging others, like working with one person, hearing myself say, you're a fraud, and stuff like that. So instead of feeling that, we transmute it into creativity and
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's all for today. It's 11:23 and 12:23. I'm like an hour behind. Thank you for today. It was an incredible topic as always. And thank you for sharing your journey.
Likewise. Thank you.
Hopefully there's going to be more questions coming our way based on this conversation. I would imagine there's going to be a lot of people that are curious and wanting to know more. So looking forward to those. Other than that, thank you everybody for joining Rachel and I for today. And thank you, Rachel, for being your authentic self, as always, on each and every one of these calls. So thank you. And I look forward to our next week call.
Yeah.
See what we're going to brew up then.
Yes. I'm excited.
Yes.
Until then.
Yes, thank you. And until then, thanks. Bye.
Bye.